David, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Rupert.
So, for people that don't know, give us a bit more in terms of your broader background and a bit more about the business today and what you guys do over at TLC.
Just from myself, from my own experience. So I've one of those kind of very fortuitous career paths over the years. I actually started off as a developer many years ago on the initial PlayStation games, and I was doing that also whilst in university as well. And that was a real kind of hotbed of activity, and it was very much a focus on delivery and getting things over the line, and you get a real insight as to how teams work, and how you need to collaborate to be able to generate success, particularly in those types of environments. Later, as I moved on in my career, I went into the more broader technology transformations and worked for some very large organizations, including the likes of CGI and also Hewlett Packard as well.
Mhm.
And we were dealing with global technology transformations. These were transformations which are in some cases were in the hundreds of millions of dollars, if not the kind of $1 billion type of accounts. Those huge monolithic accounts don't tend to exist these days,
Yeah.
but certainly that was kind of the background on which I was brought up on through the industry. And what that really embedded into me is a real strong sense of good practice of having a process and a way of working. And I think that's really served me well throughout my career because you always step forward from that foundation. And in actual fact, I was watching a podcast a few weeks ago, and it was Jeff Bezos, and Bezos was saying one of the things he would always advise founders to do is actually have that kind of bedding in an organization where you learn best practice really
Hmm.
well,
Yeah.
because then you can step forward from there, understanding what good should look like. And that served me really well throughout my career. So as I've moved into the more private equity VC space and worked with companies who are clearly of a much smaller scale than the likes of HP and some of the others I've worked with, I've been able to identify the best practices and the ways of working and how we can generally improve the business,
Hmm.
whether that be from a point of view of sales activity and pipeline generation, whether that's back office transformation, or whether that's actually core product development. Because I've got that kind of grounding in real good, solid processes and ways of working,
Hmm.
and all that training which is associated with that,
Yeah.
then that really helps me get some or bring forward some very valuable insight, which I think sits well with private equity organizations as well, because they're always constantly looking for that kind of expertise, that insight, which is going to be the differentiator for them and their businesses.
And how do you, I suppose, sort of put the value on good, right? Because it can be quite subjective. Like good to one person is very different to good to another person. So, what does good look like?
Oh, and again, you're absolutely right. Everyone has their own perspective on that, and I think that's one of the tricks in this whole process. You have to understand what everyone's definition of good it
Hmm.
really is,
Yeah.
and whether or not we think there's a way to actually get to that position, and what other compromises as well that you might need to take on that journey, so to speak. But having that ability to communicate, having that ability to kind of articulate the journey and work with business people who are not necessarily from a technical background and don't maybe understand the challenges of transformation. Once you start to fill that in, the definition of good starts to become clear, not just for yourself,
Hmm.
but also maybe for the CEO of the business, maybe also for the COO or the CFO as well, and also for the investors as
Yeah.
well, because often where you reach there is almost a compromised position, which is okay, that's good. This view might be good, but to get to that, here's the steps that we've got to take. At that point, the business might look at it again and say, okay, maybe we can find a different way, a more the kind of a way with less steps in this or less
Yeah.
challenge, because you're always looking for the most efficient, the most productive way to use the resources that you have at hand
Yeah.
to gain the outcome that you need.
Nice. And in terms of we mentioned you've got experience working across in different locations with companies across the world.
Yeah.
How do you think that shaped your leadership style?
It makes you very attuned to the nuances of culture, and also the value of that within various different work environments as well. And also, just more broadly, I lived a long time in places like Austria and Germany, and you become more attuned to the language barriers that exist. Yes, people all speak English, and in some countries, some of the English is really excellent, but there is nuances in the way that you use your language, and it makes you understand that you need to just step back and make sure that communication is real clear,
Hmm.
and that then also drives again a kind of understanding of having good documentation in place, having good control in place, making sure that everyone is crystal clear on what is being asked of them and what again good looks like. Um, so that's something which I've certainly learned as I've worked in places like Malaysia, also in India as well, um, and also not just kind of being there for a week, but actually being within those cultures for elongated periods of time,
Yeah.
sometimes a year, 2 or 3 years, and that really serves you well because you can then, once you start to understand some of the challenges of those cultures and those working environments,
Mm.
it becomes easier to work with people in those areas as well.
Yeah, I think that's so important because most leaders who work in international organizations, they tend to go on a business trip and they'll go there for a week or two at a time. There's no way you can get ingrained into the culture and align yourself with, okay, what are the challenges that these people are facing comparatively to what we're facing?
It's a completely different dynamic. Being somewhere where you're staying in a hotel and you're basically there for 2 weeks is a completely different dynamic to living and working in those environments
Mm.
in those countries for 2 and 3 years. And you really don't get a sense of the culture if you're not there for a long period of time because that's not present. The hotels that people stay in are
Mm.
very westernized,
Yeah.
and you're moving from a hotel to an office, which is also very westernized in its structure. When you actually live in these locations and you actually see what goes on day to day, and again, the challenges that people have,
Mm.
that's when you start to understand the cultural nuances.
Yeah.
I particularly found this out. It was quite interesting during my time in Austria, where I it's one of those places that you'll go skiing or
Yep.
visit, and it's beautiful and it's wonderful.
Love it.
Um, but different when you're there,
Yeah. Yeah.
and not that it's not good, but just different from maybe the kind of the
Just the
brochure kind
mountains.
of like
Yeah.
post
Yeah. Yeah.
version
Yeah.
of it, so to speak.
Not
Um,
everyone's wearing their lederhosens with a yodel.
and you also you start to get an insight into the mindset of the people who live in those countries as well, because slightly different. We like to think that we all, and there are some common groundings amongst people across the world, always. But those cultural differences are what makes it all unique and really special
Hmm.
as well. And it's embracing those, which is really key. Because once you understand that, you can also then get the best out of the people who are working with you as well.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's so key. That is so key.
What's the thing that's surprised you the most about like all your different sort of places that you've been in terms of that sort of cultural difference and having to really understand it where you went, oh my god, I didn't expect that.
I think what I've seen is some of the things that you take for granted when you live in a country like the UK and you're brought up in such a country, when you step out into certain countries around the world, which are maybe less developed in certain areas, um, you see the challenges of people just getting things done in those environments. So it becomes very bureaucratic in certain countries to just get rather simple things done.
Hmm.
Now, fortunately, I've always had support mechanisms around me to help employees kind of overcome some of those hurdles. But these might be, in some cases, some private things
Yeah. Okay.
that employees have, some just general day to day living challenges. Uh, And that's where getting involved and really caring for the employees' welfare,
Hmm.
really helping and supporting people in the right way. And again, that's what really makes the difference. That's where you start to see the change in the mindset of the team, that you're there to actually really support them and help them, not just from a point of view of their professional
Yeah.
capability, but also as well, you're looking out for their welfare, you're looking out for their lives more broadly, and how you can make sure that the work life balance and how work operates around their lives as well is structured in the right way. Unfortunately, it is sometimes the case that when you go into when I've gone into certain countries in the past, some of the employees have come through from other organizations who have not really tried to build that type of support capability
Hmm.
in place. So when I've brought people into work for me, they often have seen that step change of, I'm genuinely interested in the people who work with me and work as part of the team,
Yeah.
because I really want to see people succeed and drive their career forward. That's really, that for me is the thing which really drives me in terms of
Yeah.
people's performance. Yeah.
Nice. And it might sound like a silly question because it, again, may seem simple to you, but to other people out there, because as you mentioned, there's lots of businesses that don't have these mechanisms in place. And
Mhm.
I can't believe it's because they're all narcissists and they don't want to help people, right? They just don't know how to do it, or there's blockers. Like, how do you put these processes in place? Is it just putting in like SOPs, structure?
The beginning of this is having a very formulaic structure, yeah,
Yeah.
so that everyone knows where they stand, everyone knows what they're doing, and everyone knows their responsibilities and their accountabilities. That's the starting point, because that makes it very clear to everyone about what the expectations are and how to work with colleagues and so on and so forth. And then you can start to also as well align behaviors
Mm.
as well, and make sure that we're all working in the right way, in a very respectful way, which really kind of heightens or gets the best behavior out of people.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, there's always challenges throughout that, because and it's never one unique way of addressing the problem, but getting that kind of structure in place from the very outset really helps people. And again, going back to the early stages in my career, the need for good process there really helps people as well.
Yeah.
Because again, people sometimes have come from organizations where there is less focus on structure and process. And that doesn't really give people always the foundation that is needed to be successful.
Yeah.
So putting that in place often really, and I've seen it myself. I've seen people who come in and they start off and they're kind of, they're not a great performer. They're,
Hmm.
they're fairly solid, but you put that structure in place, you put that foundation in place, you invest in them and you work with them and you be honest and truthful and transparent with them. You can change people into real star performers
Yeah.
and really get the best from them. And that's a reciprocal thing as well, because then they see the growth and the capability
Yeah.
that and what they could do, and that sometimes is eye opening for the individuals as well,
Yeah.
which is a fascinating journey to be on with those people.
It's great, isn't it?
Yeah, to see how people develop is really insightful.
It tends to be the enjoyable part of the job once you get into leadership for most, not some, but for most, is seeing people develop and come through and being able to help them to sometimes even light a bit of a fire to
Uh,
go, right, this is exciting.
It is, and you can see, as you say, the fire is kind of on the shine in their eyes, so to speak,
Yeah.
because they're doing the thing that they love.
Mm.
And this is also another thing which I think I've learned throughout my career is give people the opportunity to do the thing that they love, really, and to that extent, give them the right support and guidance, and to to a degree, get out of their way
Mm.
as well,
Yeah.
because if people love what they're doing, they will invest the time. They will kind of coach themselves as well. They will do a lot of that themselves,
Yeah.
and they will go out and try to learn more around the subject. And I see that a lot with the team which I've got now and teams which I've had previously as well.
Nice. And you've done lots of advisory work, as you said, for PE
Yeah.
firms, VCs on strategy,
Yes.
solving some of their problems? Like, what are the typical things that they're asking you to solve? Like, what are the problems that they're tending to have from a tech perspective?
I mean, general themes which come across because every business is different, and every private equity has somewhat different focus. But generally, it is a real need for clarity around vision, strategy, and the plan that we're going to execute, which supports that, and ultimately the organization that you need to achieve that vision and strategy. And that sounds kind of very kind of like obvious to say, but it's when you start to get into the detail of that, having a strategy that you know is actually going to work and actually deliver, and the plan which supports that,
Hmm.
that is not as easy to execute through.
Yeah.
So it's that. So generally, what I see when I'm speaking with PEs is that need for clarity around that,
Okay.
so that they know, okay, what's coming, when it's coming, how does that address, and how does that help enterprise value? How does that grow the value of the business?
Hmm.
How does that grow from a revenue perspective? How does that grow from an EBITDA perspective? And how does that maybe differentiate us away from others in the market? Gives us something unique. Because again, all these things contribute to enterprise value, which is really helpful for ultimately an exit event
Hmm.
for a PE. But having that plan and aligning that to the strategy and the broader strategy of the business as well,
Yeah.
and being able to articulate that on terms which everyone understands, gets, and sees clearly where the value is being created, that is generally the points which come across.
Yeah.
Um, of course, as you go through that journey, certain things change. People get a little bit more into the detail.
Yeah.
Um, but you have to build that solid foundation of a clear picture and a clear way forward from the outset.
And would you categorize those things under due diligence, or would you separate those two things?
So some of it, so at diligence, you can kind of get a view of that,
Hmm.
but a lot of this comes post the deal, so
Okay.
to speak.
Okay. So this is post deal
So
rather than, yeah. Okay.
post deal, and you will see, and you will be familiar with this. A lot of recruitments of CTOs and also chief product officers and various other key staff is done post a deal,
Yep.
because sometimes there's a need for a step change. Sometimes the CTO that got you to here is not the CTO which is going to get you to there.
In fact, very often
Um,
that's the case. Yeah.
yeah, we know this, right? So we know this because a CTO is not a CTO, so to speak. There's different flavors.
Yeah, there is. And they don't want to do that next job. They often go, this isn't for me.
Yeah, there are those, the typical founder CTO is more of more of that engineering background,
Hmm.
as where the PE CTOs, the more kind of mainstay PE CTOs, are people who've been through that transformation journey
Yeah.
and have the ability, and can intuitively talk about value that they're generating and not technology that they're kind of bringing into the business,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, the technology is always a means to an end,
Yeah.
should be. And that's, I think, always the one of the challenges which I've always seen, is making sure that if we're going to do anything from a technology point of view, if the technology strategy is going to drive an outcome, that has to be aligned to the business metrics,
Hmm.
to the value of the business, to the revenue, to the EBITDA that we're going to drive.
Do you think that's an area that sometimes you've seen people get wrong?
I've frequently seen,
Yeah.
unfortunately, situations where it becomes a far too technical conversation, or the clarity is not there.
Okay.
And this is where this is where the experience comes into play. You've got to be able to articulate this in terms which everyone can follow, in terms which everyone can kind of get, because everyone these days, particularly exec teams, have a limited ability to actually absorb huge amounts of information
Hmm.
because they're dealing with so many things.
Yeah.
The world moves so fast. What you need to do as a CTO is increasingly take very complex challenges and crystallize them into this is what that means. And ultimately, that's the outcome that we reach for the business.
Yeah.
If you can do that, then you'll find a far easier conversation always with other execs, with peers, but certainly with investors as well.
Yeah. And it's about those business outcomes, as you say. It's taking it away from everything else is ultimately to those people as investors and execs is noise. They don't really care. They want to know what's the return on the investment that I'm making.
Yeah, and you do from time to time you come across various different investors who are very technically savvy, and they really want to understand
Mm.
the challenges. And again, a good thing with my experience is I'm able to kind of, if you want to go into the detail, we'll go into the detail.
Yeah.
But generally, the conversation is much more about what we're trying to achieve, by when that's going to be achieved, and what the best benefits are for the business. The important thing is alignment.
Yeah. Okay.
Everyone has to believe that. Everyone has to be assured that that's the right thing. And I spend a lot of time making sure that we're constantly keeping alignment on a day-to-day basis, because it's easy to get for misunderstandings to arise. It's easy for transformation activities to start to not deliver in the right way.
Yeah.
So keeping that alignment with your peers is so critical these days, because at the end of the day, it's a team effort, and it's the team which achieves the outcome with the business. And that's one of the things which I think it's the biggest transformation for CTOs
Yeah.
over the last few years, in particular over the last 20 years that I've seen. A lot of CTOs were the technical gurus, but they almost sat separate outside of the business.
Yeah.
Uh, Now CTOs are an integral part of the team. They have to be, and the technology is an integral part of the business.
Yeah.
I During previous years gone by, I used to rail against this concept of the business and tech.
Yeah.
The business is tech. Tech is part of the business.
Yeah.
Right? It's all one and the same thing. And they used to often you'd hear this in conversation, which was the kind of like the tech team were perceived as some sort of addition or
They're
some
just
sort of
siloed by themselves,
yeah,
renegades doing
yeah,
what they want.
exactly.
Yeah.
Some strange organization
Yeah.
which is not
We don't
really
talk to
like
them.
yeah,
Yeah.
don't and there wasn't that alignment. So I always pushed back against that, and
Yeah.
I always worked with CEOs and with investors to say we're core, we're absolutely core to, and let's not talk in those terms,
Mm.
because by talking in those terms, it almost becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you talk like that, then you're instantly going to start to behave like that.
Yeah.
And it's also not good for the technology and the product people on the ground as well. They need to know that what they're doing is core and really drives the value. And that comes back to, people at an individual level want to know that the things that they're doing as part of a business really have an impact.
Yeah. And have you seen investment firms and companies miss out on technology opportunities because they've not been so aligned with the tech and the business? They're not as one.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, I've seen it quite often
Yeah.
where there isn't an alignment around the kind of business strategy and the technology strategy. And often they're the points that someone like me is often brought into the whole conversation. But I've frequently seen it where there isn't that alignment, or the business has this mindset of tech is something else,
Mm.
and data, and to an extent that's also happened with data and data science, because very complex, very difficult, challenging subject. Okay, let's keep it at an arm's length, right? And not really engage it, or we need that in far more simplistic terms. And I particularly through, I think there was a period between, I would say, 2010 to 2000, well, just pre-COVID. So that kind of decade where I was consistently seeing that disconnect between what tech organizations can achieve within a broader business, um, and also as well what data organizations can achieve as an outcome, and businesses weren't leveraging that in the right way.
Hmm.
The businesses for me who are really going to be successful who are those who really integrate that as part of the soul and core of what they're doing.
Yeah.
If you get that right, then all of a sudden you have products and capabilities which are differentiating. You have people who are far more actively engaged, and it becomes quite an exciting atmosphere. And that's that's something which I've always pushed for to
Yeah.
achieve within the working environment.
People then come along the journey with you. They're, as you say, more engaged, right? They want to do the work.
It's a wonderful thing to see when you've got CFOs, CEOs, COOs actively engaged in the conversations
Mm.
around data.
Yeah.
And it's actually, and I'm not saying that it's always completely aligned, right?
At
The
least they're
fact,
talking about it, though.
but the fact is that they're talking about
Yeah.
it, yeah, and that's an exciting thing because then you start to talk about the art of the possible and where you can take this and what new things can be achieved, and that's really, that for me, that's the bit which always gets me out of bed, so to speak.
Yeah.
Is that level of excitement, is that level of enthusiasm of what can we achieve today?
Yeah. It takes it beyond the baseline, right?
Like,
That everyone's doing.
it's great when you're not, and I think that's one of the things which I personally mark myself in terms of my own measurement of success. If I get a business, everyone in the business talking in those terms, I know I'm doing a good job
Yeah.
at that point
Yeah.
because they must have at some point listened to what I was
Yeah.
saying. And the fact that they're kind of relaying things in that way and understanding not just that this is kind of magic and smoke and mirrors and we can all achieve everything, but understanding the practicalities and the steps that we need to take.
Yeah.
If businesses are talking in those terms, then certainly I've had some success as a CTO.
Yeah. Good. And we talked a bit about AI, and we can't not talk about AI. And I'm sorry, I have to bring it up again. But when we previously spoke, you mentioned you've sort of moved beyond not just building like predictive models. You're looking at like true agentic
Oh yeah,
AI systems
yeah,
in some of the work that you're doing.
yeah.
'Cause there's a lot of noise around AI, right? Everyone's doing something with AI. Again, we spoke about. I've been to some events recently, and everyone's talking about AI, which is great. I'm very happy to talk about it.
Yeah.
But
95% of any conference that you go to at this moment in time is AI, and then there's usually a stall somewhere where someone's not talking about AI, and
yeah,
no one's standing there.
no one
So,
is. So everyone's talking about it, right? But
so it is, and unfortunately, we do as an industry, we do have this. We do it to ourselves. We are constantly always kind of bringing forward the next great thing, and so on and
oh
so forth.
yeah,
And you could, if you looked over the technology industry over the last 30 years, you could be critical and say every 7 years we're always doing this, right? It's something new,
there's something. Yeah,
yeah, something game changing, something evolutionary. Um, but in actual fact, this I think is different.
yeah,
And it's different because there is firstly, and let's not talk about the levels of investment which have gone into it, but the volume of incredibly bright people and the structure and the organizations which have been put around trying to get more value out of this technological capability is really, really that's really exciting.
hmm,
Because if you start to have organizations like Anthropic, like OpenAI, with the resources that they've got, and again, I don't just mean the financial resources, but the people, the
yep.
knowledge, the insight, then you're inevitably going to generate something which is really quite game changing. I think the for businesses, and that's kind of one end of the scale because these kind of $1 trillion valuation businesses, which, as I understand, that's where Anthropic is going to be when it floats on the on
Which is mad in
the
itself,
Nasdaq.
right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. They're literally talking about a valuation which is just short of $1 trillion. So, but that is one end of the scale. And the problem is that we can get quickly absorbed into that type of bubble. the reality for most businesses who are kind of 300-400 people and a certain level of revenue is, how do we get that into our business? How
Mhm.
do we adopt that? Where do we utilize it? What does it mean for us?
Yep.
Right. And when you actually start to have honest conversations with many other CTOs and CIOs, which I've done quite frequently over the last 2 years or so, in actual fact, they're all struggling with the same questions.
Yeah.
Some have gone into what I would refer as pilot purgatory, right? Where they've got like 300 pilots of whatever it is that's running in the background, burning a huge amount of tokens
Yep.
but these are very disjointed activities, and they're not kind of looking at how you redesign the ways of working. They're just kind of very isolated, very reactive,
Yep.
and very tactical actions, which in some ways do inform a broader knowledge base of what can be done. But you've got to join the pitch together.
Mhm.
This is a transformation journey,
Yep.
and it's something that we learned particularly 18 months ago when we started to really introduce some really good AI capabilities into TLC. We learned very quickly that this was about transformation. This was about taking people on the journey. You can't redesign the way that people work if you haven't included people in that
Yeah. Yeah.
conversation.
It's a fundamental part of it, right?
Yeah. At best, you're going to be disjointed. At worst, you're going to get a complete pushback.
Yep.
You need people to be part of that conversation. And again, it comes back to a little bit of having process and structure in place, because if you're going to restructure your way of working, you actually have to have a baseline.
Mm.
Because otherwise, you're investing in AI, but if you don't know where you're at as a baseline, how can you ever prove the value of the investment
Yeah,
that you've made?
exactly. You'll
So
never know. You go, we're not sure if it worked.
yeah, exactly.
Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. We think it's better. You're,
Yeah, it becomes a very subjective
yeah,
judgment-based call, which was, we were there, we're now there, and there is better, we think.
yeah. Yeah.
And,
Most people will say there is better because they just will.
yeah, well,
They
exactly.
won't even say we think
You're never going to say, well, we spent 6 months trying to do this on a load of cash, and actually
millions of dollars.
we've
Yeah.
just kind of gone somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
It has to be, you're always going to stand by the notion that it's better. So you have to then take a step back and say, okay, look, what's the transformation that we're on here? What's that broader processes that we're trying to enable? Again, align what you're trying to achieve to the objectives of the business.
Mm.
There's no point in going off and investing, not just, again, not just financially investing, but people's time and training and insights into AI capabilities without really understanding where you're going to take the business with that.
Yeah.
And that has to be clear again, because I would never step into those journeys unless my peers are clear where we're going, because I have an obligation to them to make sure that what I'm suggesting is what they're aligned with us,
Yeah.
and equally with our investors as well.
Yeah.
Going off on random tangents with just because AI is the kind of flavor of the month, it's not really good. But the and again, it's the whole challenge with AI is not a kind of one size fits all type
Hmm.
of thing. Because of course you got and again, everyone's initial focus was the generative stuff. Great, but the generative stuff is very reactive, very tactical.
Mm.
It's not going to really be the thing which moves the needle in your business. The agentic stuff potentially is,
Yep.
because then you're joining multiple activities together.
Yep.
There's pitfalls in the agentic approach as well, where you've got to really step back and think about how you're implementing this.
Hmm.
We were having a debate some time ago about this and the structure of the agents and what you want agents to do.
Yeah.
And do you want one monolithic agent,
Yeah.
or do you want to actually take kind of a microservices approach
Yeah.
and have smaller
All
agents
the,
with discrete functions?
yeah.
Okay. And then join these things together. Well, again, horses for courses,
It
because
depends, right?
some
Yeah.
people might say, actually, look, I know this and end to end, and I want it to do all these steps equally, some other businesses might say, do you know what? I really want that flexibility that actually these discrete agents give me.
Hmm.
So again, you need to look at that overall architecture of your agentic AI and what you're trying to achieve as a business objectives and make
Yeah.
sure that all that's aligned. It's not, and that's the bit where CTOs need to step into that mindset.
Hmm.
And some are,
Yeah.
some are a little bit behind the curve on that.
Yeah.
Um, but you have to absorb this. You have to take it on board, and you have to learn it. You have to understand the nuances of things like MCP. You have to understand LangChain and these types of technologies these days,
Yeah.
because they are in the same way that we used to talk client server in many, many years ago, pre-cloud architecture.
Yeah.
Um, you have to have these frames, these terms of reference,
Yeah.
and you have to be able to understand how you can leverage these and what is appropriate and what is not.
Yeah.
That's the role of the CTO.
And it's just a, I was going to say simple. That's the wrong word because nothing's simple necessarily, but it's a transformation in its true core.
Yeah.
Right. So we've had the age of digital transformation, which there are also plenty of organizations still going through a
Yeah.
traditional digital transformation, by the way, as you know. Um, but now it's looking at, okay, well, digital transformation 2.0 or whatever we want to call it is involving AI, right? We're taking it to the next level. So we're going to go through the same processes to work out like how this transformation fits the business, bring in experts to help us do it rather than just trying to figure it out by ourselves.
Yeah. And I think that's where the gap in the knowledge still exists,
Mm,
is not necessarily do you understand AI technologies and the capabilities? The question is more, do you understand how to drive a transformation with that
yeah.
type of capability?
And most people haven't done this
I
because
haven't.
that's the thing. So people are still learning as they figure it out. As was said earlier, everyone's still figuring out how it works. They may have done a traditional digital transformation in the
Yeah.
past,
Yeah.
which is similar, but there's going to be nuanced things and terms and
And but that's the actual. You've hit on one of the key points there. There is a lot of learnings from the technology and digital transformations that have been done in the past, and there's lots of practices that you just need to bring into an AI based transformation.
yeah,
And but equally as well, you need to start to get your business talking in those frames of reference as well. You know, we used to have cloud first, now we've got AI first. Okay, well, to a certain extent, it does make me laugh when we do that as an industry.
yeah,
Um, but there is something in it,
yeah,
right? Which is we need to all think like that. And once you get, again, it's not just the CTO function to think like that.
hmm,
Once you get the entire business thinking like that, you're then on a really good path. You're then on a path where it becomes second nature to the business to say, actually, you know what? If we actually do the following, we can achieve the same outcome without necessarily having three times more staff in a certain area.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, there is lots of potential there, but there is lots of learning and lots of maturing that needs to happen really quickly. The thing that I will say is, I'll sit here now and I'll say this: in 12 months, that will have been caught up a lot,
yeah,
and that's what I'm seeing. Whereas if I step back 15 years ago, technologies used to enter into the market, which was sometimes game changing in the approach. And let's take cloud as
hmm,
an example.
yep,
Cloud took a huge time for businesses to really adopt.
yeah.
Of course, there were larger, much bigger scale enterprises who completely got this right, but they had the investment and they could do it. They were more hindered by the legacy challenge that they
Well,
had.
yeah, taking everything off
So, yeah,
on prem to the
literally a
cloud.
bunch of on-prem servers
Yeah,
that no one knew exactly what these things did, right? So, um, but I was surprised by the amount of businesses who were in that kind of like 100 to kind of 1,000 headcount business
hmm,
space, um, who still hadn't gone cloud.
hmm,
Now, I think the vast majority, eventually, organizations have got around the hurdle and nearly everyone's kind of got their heads around that problem. What I'm seeing with the AI first approach, if we use that,
Yep.
is that I think people held their ground initially for the last 18 months or so, but now there is a real push.
Yeah.
So then that's why I say within the next 12 months, people will have made that transformation. They
Yep.
will have had to do that. They will have had to drive that outcome. And that's why, again, I say there is something far more tangible here than the ebbs and flows of what's happened in the technology market in the past.
Yeah. Well, people are getting used to the technology now and they understand it a little better. No one understands it perfectly, I don't think. Well, maybe a few people here and there, but people now start to really sort of realize the benefits and they are asking a lot of the right questions and going, okay, this
Yeah.
isn't just noise, it's not going away. We need to work out how we can harness this
Yeah.
in whatever we're doing.
I think, yeah. And I think this is where kind of Anthropic and OpenAI particularly, but even Microsoft and many others now get it right, is because employees in the work environment are exposed through generative AI
Hmm.
to the potential power. So it makes it actually a bit of an easier step for CTOs when you start to talk about what else you can do and you introduce concepts of agentic AI,
Yeah.
then it's not so much of a leap for people.
It's not a hard sell to your finance team
Yeah.
to say, well, we're going to use this stuff in AI and they're not suddenly so scared going,
Yeah.
what's happening to my job?
Yeah. Look,
They see it as an enabler.
I remember in 2012 trying to having to explain to our finance teams why you couldn't capitalize all the stuff that is now in cloud, right?
Right.
Which
Yeah.
which was a bit of a shock to them. Um, so so because of that, the work and the services that OpenAI and Anthropic and many others have brought to the market, that has got everyone thinking in those terms.
Mm.
So I'm optimistic, and hopefully, you know, I think our use of this type of technology will rapidly mature, and not we tend to as humans use these types of technologies for superficial stuff initially, but eventually we get our heads around it
Yeah.
and start to really bring forward some true game changing business applications. But it's always the nature of these types of advancements, which is the people, the benefit which is identified comes later.
Mm. Yeah.
So great, we've got a foundational game changing tech in what these guys have done in these organizations. There will be a next step, a new generation of people who start to build out really, really tangible use cases against this. And you can see this already starting to happen
Yeah.
with more and more kind of agent agentic capabilities coming online. And some of it is you now start to look at some of it and go, that's really smart. Someone's really thought that through.
And when we spoke last time, you mentioned that you guys have been working on building some recommendation engines that had
Yeah.
around about 90%, 8% accuracy
Yeah.
or over.
Yeah.
That's quite smart to me.
Yeah.
So
That's what.
how did that start? Talk to me about that
No,
project.
this is, and it all starts from the same position of you understand what your market needs and
Yeah.
you understand what you can offer as a potential proposition within that market. So it's not necessarily an instinctive, okay, here's what we can do with AI.
Yeah.
You're trying to solve a business problem. You're trying to bring something new and exciting and innovative to your customers. You're trying to get that competitive edge
Yep.
a little bit. And again, that is your starting point. Then you start to look at what you could do with AI to solve problems. Because in many cases, what you're able to do is you knew these problems existed previously, but you
Hmm.
could never solve them, right? Because it was never there. Now you've got the opportunity to kind of say, right, so how do we get to a position where we can build something where we have an engine which recommends the right type of campaign for our customers in such a way that it delivers that with a high level of accuracy. So our customers can be assured that if they follow the guidance that we're giving, they're going to drive the outcome that they want to achieve on their side, which
Hmm.
That might be more brand awareness. That might be an uptick in the sales that they see of that particular brand. But we want to make sure that we always get to that place where we've done all the hard work in the background, where we've got the models in the background, and we can say with a level of credibility based on our expertise, based on our knowledge, here's the best way to go about achieving your business goals, your
Yeah.
outcomes. We've got the AI is operating as part of that to augment the whole thinking.
Hmm.
But ultimately, that takes you as as a as a provider of these
Yeah.
types of services. That takes you into a place where you're really showing that you've got your focus is on the best interests of your customers and where you can take your customers. And that's really what was driving that is how can we do something extraordinary for customers?
Yeah.
How can I sit there with a brand manager of a multinational and say, I can, within a level of accuracy, guarantee an outcome for you? And we've got to be careful of the word guarantee,
Yeah. Yeah.
but um,
Almost guaranteed.
almost guarantee. But have models in the background which show that there is a level of accuracy and predictability on the outcome.
Could you do that without AI? Because could a human give that level of accuracy in the prediction, do you think?
Not consistently, and there are too many variables,
Okay.
far too many variables. Because if you look at what you can do with AI, you can bring in literally thousands of variables, including, let's say there is because we do a lot of stuff which is kind of days out
Hmm.
offers, these
Yeah.
types of rewards. Okay, what happens if you have a really bad summer, right? Well, actually, you can use AI to kind of say, right, look, what's the long term weather forecast? And and that can actually play in
Hmm.
potentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, you could never do that with a human, right? For them to be able to do that at any speed, it's not scalable.
It's
Right?
gonna, by the time it's, some will have passed, right? By the time they've
It,
probably managed to do
yeah,
it.
if you have 100 organizations every month asking roughly those types of questions,
Yeah.
and you need to respond literally in no more than a few minutes, if not maybe an hour, right,
Yeah.
maximum.
Yeah.
You couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And that's what really AI gives you is that capability, which is again, one of the real strong use cases for AI is being able to serve up analytics and insights exceptionally quickly
Mm.
in ways that we've never had the opportunity to do. Now that is not maybe a direct line of sight of cost saving, but it really is, right?
Yeah.
It really gives people that decision making capability to act on almost immediately.
Yeah.
And, if you can do that, if you can do something at pace, then okay, that might help our customers in certain ways.
Well, it definitely helps, doesn't it, with things like reporting? Because if you think about traditional reports, it takes a while for them to be compiled, all the data to go into it. Someone to build something that someone who's C-suite level, who's doesn't like looking at lots of numbers, they'll go, "I want to see the graph. Show me the
Well,
graph, for example, simplest form."
that's the other shift, which I think, which is really this is one which is exciting for me, is traditional approach has always been get technology teams or business insight teams or business intelligence teams to build out some reports.
Hmm.
We kind of go through this kind of definition process, and then eventually someone goes off, builds these reports, and hey presto, 4 weeks later, here's your report. Right? We don't need to do that anymore going
Mm.
forward. Now it's about, have we got all the data in the background? Is that data of a good quality, and is it all joined together?
Yeah, that's the key, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. And we mustn't miss the data part of this,
Yep.
because often that gets brushed over with AI. But the reason why all these companies need the investment and the levels of people that they need is not about the AI capabilities, it's about the data in the
Yep.
background and how they manage and curate that data. So getting your data in a really fit state then enables you to basically go back to a customer and say, you want reports? Ask the system. Just type into the system and it will tell you what data you have available. And then you can ask it to build a report for you, and it will build that report for you within seconds.
Mm.
That completely shifts the
Yep.
dynamic because it's not about what report do you want, right? It's not about a visualization of a report. It's about, here's your data, it's structured in this certain type of way. use the AI to interrogate it and ask the questions that you want.
Yep.
And that is empowering people again.
Yeah.
And that is what really drives
Yeah.
businesses forward. And that's where you get excited.
It's decision
And
making in like seconds,
exactly, exactly.
ultimately, rather than having to wait a month, as you
You
say.
know, you can imagine if you've got this wealth of data in the background and your CFO or your CEO is asking these questions around the value of what we're getting from the likes of, whatever services that TLC delivers.
Yeah.
The wealth of data is there. You can just ask and you can produce the reports literally in seconds.
Yeah.
That is, again, that's game changing.
Yeah. It's amazing. And we talked a bit about like the use of tokens and people spending lots of money on AI because it's not this. You say the cost saving is not really the thing that's driving it for most people these days. I think a lot of people still selling that bit of snake oil, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Should be looking at the other things that we've been speaking about.
Yeah.
We talked a bit about budgets and having budgets, and you need to have budgets for AI, I believe. And there's been a lot of people not having budgets for AI and just throwing money at things and having unlimited budgets and just going, yeah, just spend. And I know you've been through this scenario before from other things you've been doing. So
I've had unlimited budget situations
yeah,
in the past, yeah. But not particularly with AI, but certainly from a people point of view. But no, just to come back to the AI point, and it's a critical thing. You have to put usage limits into your AI
hmm
capabilities, and that has to be a default. You cannot just leave that open ended because if you leave AI open, say for example, I give data to a customer or give an AI capability to a customer and the data is in the background and I've put no limitation on that in the background. Okay, they can run, keep going, Gary, and they could potentially generate a huge amount of cost really quickly.
yeah,
So one of the things which I always insist on with all my teams is anything that we do, which is leveraging large language models as we build out the kind of the RAG structures and various other things that we've built out, is we have to have usage limits, and that is monitored almost on a daily basis, so that we can see how it's being used, what it's being used for. And that's not necessarily to kind of like restrict anyone, but it's always to kind of look at what's happening
hmm
because then you can kind of proactively address any usage
yeah,
or those usage patterns. And to a certain extent, you can also reach out to people and say, what is it you're doing? Because you're generating a huge amount of cost here. And sometimes that what they're doing is actually of huge business value. So you
yeah,
look at it
yeah,
and go, yeah, it's fine, right? Carry
yeah,
on.
yeah, yeah,
But it's like any consumption model. Don't leave it untethered.
yeah.
Yeah.
Suddenly find you've got a huge bill at the end and
Yeah.
no value.
And there was kind of a bit of a unique situation in the past where those consumption models were kind of in the remit of the tech teams who understood, right, don't do this, don't do that, otherwise you'll spend a lot of cash really easily. With particularly with the large language models and their availability, the opportunity for that to go wrong
Mm,
really quickly is there.
yeah,
So you have to put in those limitations. And this comes back to something which I think is coming a bit more hotly up on the rails when people talk about AI is governance, structure, a real oversight on what you're doing with that tech.
yeah,
If you don't, and it's like anything, it's like any innovation, right? All these things, all technological innovations can be used in a very good, positive way, which really enhances what we're doing, but can also be very destructive very easily.
mm,
And we see many examples of that outside of the work environment,
yep,
of course. But there are examples where it's becoming deconstructive inside the work environment as well.
yep.
So you've got to be able to monitor it. And, also as well, there is a tendency for people to play with AI.
Yeah. Well, most people are playing with AI, experimenting at the moment because they're getting used to it and
Yeah.
they don't know
They want to understand the
what's
limitations
happening.
of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And you've got to be careful again with that because there is a danger that you consume a lot of resources in that learning
Mm,
activity. which is why we try to, particularly in TLC, but also as well in other places which I've worked, you try to always align back to, if we're going to do something in this space, let's make sure that it's going to generate the value that we want to. Do your legwork, do the rigor in the background
Hmm.
before you start committing down these directions. Otherwise, you will inevitably end up with a situation where CFOs, if you haven't done that legwork, and all of a sudden you're generating costs, CFOs will come up and then say, well, why have we got all this cost all of a sudden?
Yeah.
And that's again a responsibility of a CTO in the modern context, is to have got all that level setting done
Yeah.
in advance so that when you start to leverage AI capabilities at scale, and it does come with cost, everyone's okay with that because
You can
they
budget for it.
know, yeah, and they know that it's offering far more value
Yeah.
than it is cost.
Yeah.
Right? No
You're
one,
aligning it. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, many
Absolutely.
years ago when no one used to kind of bat an eyelid at the huge expense that people used to pay for SAP transformations, ERP transformations,
Yeah.
because everyone, CFOs and CEOs, and everyone in the business were completely aligned to the fact that these types of systems offer huge value. Now, you need to make sure that you're doing that with AI as well. It's spell out the value proposition, spell out where this is going, spell out what this is going to do for the business.
Yeah.
And then everyone becomes fairly a lot more relaxed about the cost that it's going to generate. But you still need to monitor it closely.
In terms of like the future and what it holds, crystal ball moment. But what are the, I suppose, like what's the, give me the one technology trend that you think people should pay attention to.
Quantum computing.
Yeah,
Yeah, seriously.
it's a great one. Yeah.
Um, because, and oddly enough, this goes back to my university days. I wrote my thesis on quantum computing, albeit it was very kind of high level and probably wildly inaccurate at the time. But the potential that has to do things that we've never even and it's really outside of the realms of even speculation.
Mm.
Um, but the first type of services are coming online, and you'll see that increasingly come of influence over the course of the next 10 years or so as more and more use cases for that type of capability start to pull around. I'm really excited to see the intercept point between AI and quantum computing.
Yes, I agree.
That will be game changing.
Yeah.
Um, it will, when that will come,
Who knows? Yeah.
I'm sure that Google will probably work. Well, they've probably made the biggest advancements in quantum computing over the course of the last few months with the stability of qubits, uh, and that's just that has gone past thresholds
Hmm.
that many researchers in this space thought were never going to be achievable. The actual stabilization that they've now got in those types of environments is something really exciting. That then lays the foundation for commercial applications of this type of technology. And you can see now that the universities are starting to get universities and various different research organizations are starting to get access to that for the first time.
Yeah.
There's teams in various different UK universities and US universities who are now signing contracts with Google and many others to get access to that quantum computing capability, almost in the way that they kind of like buy time from the telescopes and stuff like that. They're buying time from these things now. Um, the potential for that is huge. And again, there is a downside to that, which, and I wouldn't kind of panic everyone, but every cryptocurrency in the world is all of a sudden at risk
Mm.
because there is no way that those systems can literally go through any type of cryptography or any type of security that we've got
Mm.
almost within minutes.
Yeah.
So there is a downside of that. That's why we have to have the kind of controls and governance. I think if you look at in the same way that there is a bit of a battleground emerging between various different uh, countries around the world around AI, that battleground will increasingly heat up around quantum computing.
Well, let's see where it goes. David, it has been absolutely fascinating talking to you. Thank you so much again for taking the time.
Pleasure,
I
Rupert.
think we've set a few things straight today. Hopefully, given some people some insight into some things they didn't know as well. I've certainly enjoyed it, so I'm sure the listeners and the watchers have as well.
Thanks, Rupert.